Hello, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. I have been asked what is the best bind-off to match to an E-wrap cast-on. In my opinion, it is the backstitch bind-off, and here I will show you how to do it. Here I am all threaded into my yarn needle. Now backstitch is so called because we keep moving forward and then back. And every stitch is worked through twice. So we start by going down through this stitch and up through this one. And then down through this one again and up through this one. But you can see that staying on the loom, while it's not impossible, I'm going to have yarn hanging on pegs and it's going to be generally aggravating. So I'm going to suggest an alternate way of doing this. Let's first take a contrasting color of yarn and lift these stitches off the loom and onto our contrasting yarn. Pull those through. Lift. Lift. You can do the stitches one at a time or all in a group. The main thing is we just want to be free of these pegs so that we've got some elbow room. Using this method, the off the loom binding off method, is also going to allow us to control the tightness of the back stitch more completely. Now all this other yarn is doing is just holding our stitches for us. It will not be involved in the eventual bind off. And obviously another color just helps you so that you don't get mixed up between the working yarn, the real stitches, and what I'm going to call waste yarn. Yarn that's not part of the project, it's just being used as a tool. Now with my yarn needle back in my main yarn, I've actually knotted around this stitch with the yarn so as not to lose track of it. Now we go down through stitch 2 and up, back through stitch 1, now up through stitch 3. I'm saying down and up, but it's also could be conceived of as left and right. Now is the back stitch part. We're going back down through the other side of stitch 2, up through stitch 4, or right to left through stitch 4. Got a little snarl here. You can see this is the part where I'm controlling the tension at which I'm back stitching. We've been through this stitch twice. Now it's time to go through this stitch twice. And here's where our purple yarn is helping. Down through this stitch. Now we're going to skip the stitch that I just came up through and go up through the next one. Down through the stitch just before this one. Purple yarn will help me find it. Skip the stitch I worked on a moment ago. Up through the following stitch. I should tell you there are variations of backstitch. You can do it more than one stitch at a time using the same basic motion. Go through different pacings and spacings on your stitches. The main thing to remember is that every stitch should be worked through twice. Make sure you get the real stitches, not some other strand of yarn. And you always go forward, as I just did, pulling the yarn tail out of the way, and then backward through the previously worked stitch. Forward. It would make it a little easier still to use, instead of this purple waste yarn, a knitting needle, especially a circular needle, so it's flexible, and then you don't get hung up on the little yarn hairs. Alright, purple yarn, show me my stitch. There is the real stitch. Back, forward, back, make sure I get through the whole stitch, forward, back, almost done with this little piece. There you go. Last stitch. I recommend going around the last stitch one more time, and then eventually we'd probably work our yarn tail in here. But before we go, let's pull out the waste yarn. This is when it's important that you didn't catch it with your needle, and plainly I did catch it with my needle a little bit. So if you split your purple yarn, it'll be harder to get rid of, but scissors are a help. Alright, there's our edge, and there's our edge, and you can see the similarity. The more you control the tensions and make them similar, the more alike they look. They are not identical, but the E-wrap start and the forward and back movement of the back stitch are the most similar that I know, so they're the closest match I can find.